Right, thank you. First of all, my apologies. I've actually had to find another desk and do a presentation because my computer died as I was warming up there. So these are the sorts of things that can challenge us. Now, can I just ask everyone to mute their microphones, please? I can hear some feedback from someone. Thank you very much. And that's one of the things about technology. Sometimes it can be quite challenging and confronting. So I've just had a lesson in humble pie there, so it's been really good to get me grounded. My name's Colin Baskin, and I'm new to Central Queensland Uni, and I have some experience in teaching digital environments in secondary schools, but mostly in universities for around the last 20 years. So I actually began teaching in a digital mode around about the year 1995. So I was one of the original immigrants to move into this particular environment. So that's why I really enjoy this course, because it's never predictable, as I've just found out. So when we start to look at things, I'll put together a little bit of a PowerPoint slideshow. And the reason being is to give us something to focus on and a little bit of structure, because it's our first session together. Now, as this course continues, I am really hoping that you guys will take over and start to direct me, start to tell me what you want to know, start to fill up the forums with questions, that you actually take this engine and you try and drive it as far and as fast as you possibly can. My task will be to capture all of that, edit it, and put it up by way of a video each week, which I'll publish in the forums for distance students. So a big welcome. As you're probably aware, the course is actually structured along the Moodle book design, and I think Wendy Fazzo has done a fantastic job in setting that up. So what we've got here is the course outline, and I'll just drag it across, and the course structure. And as you can see, each week opens up quite logically into what is really quite a nice and structured ebook. We've got, fabulous state-of-the-art introductions, and you've got fairly cutting-edge assessment, which is something that we're probably going to spend a lot of time talking about, because it's probably unlike a lot of the assessment you've done in other courses so far. So we'll certainly look at that as we get going as well. All right, so where do we start? The first Moodle book talks about the contemporary teacher. And you have pretty much been given the guidelines for this one. They're actually in week 1. And it's the AITSL standards. Now, the standards, there's 7 of them, as you can see on the left-hand side of the page. And basically it involves you knowing students, knowing how they learn, knowing the content and how to teach it is another aspect of the standards. And these are all, fairly predictable. These are the sorts of things also that you will actually be assessed on in your practicum places in the PP subject. So, to plan for and implement effective teaching and learning, directly comes from your assessment sheets. Create and maintain supportive and safe learning environments. Again, a very direct assessment item. Assess, provide and feedback and report on student learning. All really strong professional standards. Engage in professional learning, engage professionally with colleagues, parents, carers and the community. Now, we're used to doing this as teachers. Some of you will have positions in the community where you're doing teaching and pseudo teaching roles. So often, the teachers at the front of the room, Michel Foucault, the French philosopher, wrote about this a lot. The modern school is actually based on a 17th century prison. He called it the panopticon. And in the same way that prison guards survey prisoners, the teacher is at the front of the room surveying the students. Now, it's an interesting model, and Foucault made a lot of mileage out of it, and to some degree it makes a lot of sense. But what we've also got to see is what happens to that when we get into a digital environment. What kind of presence does a digital teacher have? And so our first blog, and we'll talk about the blog a little bit later. I'll open the floor for some questions. Reflection 1.1. Now, Wendy has asked you to create a blog page in Blogspots. You may have your other blogs that you prefer to use yourself. I remember in 2003, my daughter was over in China doing a term of study for her degree. And she decided to post a blog back to us here in Australia so we could all follow her journeys out through Xi'an, the regional centres of China, and back through Beijing. And the Chinese government shut her blog down, and it disappeared. And the funny thing was, it actually reappeared a few years later with the Beijing Olympics when China went all friend scenario. So a blog, again, most of you may or may not have done a blog before. And this first one actually asks you on a scale of 0, totally unprepared, to 10, totally ready. And how ready are you to teach with ICT in your classroom? Where would you rank yourself? And base your judgment on the 2 documents above, that is the standards documents and the descriptors for the standards, which are actually on the webpage. Quick rehash. There we have on the left-hand side the 7 AITSL standards. We have our first reflection task, and I thought I'd go ahead and model for you the sorts of things you can do in a reflective task. Some people are saying, but it's not like an essay, it's first person, it's actually a lot more fun than an essay, and this is the sort of thing that I want to try and encourage you to think about. And what I've done is actually put up this little task myself. I've gone through and created my own blog. I haven't done it for many years, so that was a lot of fun. So like you, I'm learning how to sit with this level of discomfort. So on a scale of 0 to 10, and how did I respond to that? And the way things are going today, you wouldn't think it, but I'd actually rank myself at around about 9.5 in terms of readiness to teach with ICTs in my classroom. And I always leave some wriggle room, and I'm getting a good dose of that today, because sometimes technology can go wrong. It's pouring rain here in Townsville. I don't know whether that's got something to do with the issue. So I've written a little bit there about that. You know, some of the things that cause me a little bit of concern. You know, Moodle has been upgraded. I'm new to CQU. Blackboard Collaborate has been replaced by Zoom. I'm not sure all the bugs are out of it yet. And all these just-in-time system rolls out mean that I, as a teacher, I feel a little bit exposed. So it's okay to say in your reflective task that you feel a little bit exposed. Now, looking at the AITSL documents, it actually said to me, you know, why do I think what I think? You know, my little blog. And I came out and said, well, you know, here's a little bit of my theory. Learners can and do become engaged in learning through intrinsic motivations without the need for a teacher or instructional designer. So this is why we teach with technology, because theoretically, if there's something there to be learned, then that's motivation in itself. And a lot of you are learning for the workplace too. That puts an extra, I mean, this is a digital technology for secondary school. So this is very much a workplace course. And so it's kind of self-guided, and it's based on the needs of the task at hand. And I'm starting to see, is, you know, in brackets, I'm linking these back to some of the standards. So I'm not purely reflecting out in space. I'm actually, it's guided reflection, it's connected reflection. In the higher education sector, I go on to say the teacher has a major role in shaping the conditions in which students can become engaged in their own learning. And that's particularly true in an online environment. I know I'm having some troubles today, but by and large, the sort of pedagogy that Wendy Fazzo has set up in this course is a challenging one. It's going to get you thinking, and it's going to put you through some hoops. And you'll certainly have plenty to reflect about. Hence, these standards should become second nature to you. So in my teaching, I try to focus on the conditions of good instruction that can be argued to increase the engagement of learners. And I come out here and I describe a model that I've used and have been using for many years called the contributing student model. And that actually helps me to achieve and point to a lot of the AITSL descriptors. And then I go on to explain by using specific descriptors. Now what I'll do is I'll pause there and give people an opportunity for any questions. Doesn't matter how silly you think it is. If you have a question, please just fire it out. I'm happy to answer. And tell me what you think of those reflections. Was that what you thought you would do as well?
That's right, yeah. Or even copy and paste there or something somebody submitted. That still takes time.
No comments. Perhaps we can prompt people. John, would you care to comment? Do they look like reasonable responses to you?
Yeah, they look really good responses. Mine doesn't look anything like that. To be honest, mine didn't really include the standards very much. I did read them and then tried to base it, but yeah, it was pretty good.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's really important. Phoebe, how did you go doing this particular task?
Looking at your reflections compared to mine were not quite as long. I didn't make any direct links to the standards, but I mean, I could always add that in. But yeah, I was kind of just thinking of things that I was just talking sort of from a personal perspective, not necessarily including the standards so much.
Lovely. Now, I mean, there's no right and wrong answer. I mean, you know, what you've done is probably quite good and probably quite appropriate for you. Definitely, you also have the opportunity to extend that and link to the standards. And this is, you know, kind of what we're doing in our reflections. We are trying to demonstrate. You know, it's kind of a small demonstration. It is a little bit of micro-teaching, I suppose, in a digital environment. And this is what we're trying to model. It is a cognitive mapping. And you know, and it's also a personal one too. There's also, you know, a reaction component to it and a reflection component. So there's definitely no right and wrong. But if you can strengthen your reflections by connecting to the descriptors, then that's always a good thing to do, because these are the sorts of things that you'll be assessed on in your classroom when you go into your pracs. So it's a fairly important thing to do. All right, now, anyone else like to comment on that or anything they'd like to add or say? As I said, as this course progresses, I really want you guys to take over. I want to be working for you. That's what I'm paid for. I'm here for you. And I really would like to see you drive it as much as you possibly can. Moving on to the next slide. Setting up your blog. Now, did anybody have any particular problems with this? Candace, have you got your blog up and running?
Yes, I just had a go at doing it before. I seemed to feel good with setting it up.
Fantastic. And it went all right for you? You've managed to set it up?
Yeah, I have. I haven't added any of the reflections to it yet because I just set it up today. Yeah.
Excellent. And it's really important. What we often find, and it's the first time I've taught this course, but it's not unusual in online learning, that there's a big peak of activity around about the assessment time. So in other words, people basically say, yeah, it's online, I'll get there in week 5 when assessment's due and I'll do it. Try not to do that. This course is structured so that you're doing, you know, a reflection week 3, week 4, week 5. And then your assessment piece on that is a 1,500-word collaborative reflection, taking in those 3 pieces and commenting on some of your, you know, again, some of the standards and how you're performing and how they're challenging you as a teacher. So try, if you can, try not to let it build up. If you can, try and do, you know, a reasonable amount of work in this subject each week. Try and get your blog activities flowing along so that when you do sit down to write it up as assessment, you've given it considerable thought and you can actually piece it together as you know, a deep personal reflection. Reflection number 2, if you haven't already done so, follow the guide, set up your blog, and you've got to write your first post. Now, I actually put mine in there, it was just a small welcome. Identify your approach to teaching, and the model I've talked about and the one that I'm going to share with you is just to extend your thinking, because often we think, well, you know, computers, we just use computers, you know, but think again, you know, we want to extend that thinking. Why do we use computers? And this set of axes on your right here comes out of Holland, out of the Netherlands. Betty Collis and Van Moonen put together this particular model to describe how students begin in a Moodle, like you, with a set of materials. But by the time they finish the course, you know, that's in the bottom left-hand corner, the content is not organised for instruction. There's little or no human communication, and you know, you're seeing considerable periods of silence here, although the discussion boards are getting going. But as they head out on that trajectory along the 2 axes, heading north and heading right, we can actually see that they're going through various stages of working with the content. And the content of the subject gets interpreted by the learner. And so the learner begins to blog. They begin to create a wiki, you know, of evidence of their materials. They begin to construct their own little portfolio of understanding. And that's essentially what we're doing in this course. And eventually we'll move to a community of practice where there will be people in the course, you know, working and adopting in similar ways. There'll be people in the course using technology purely for instruction. There'll be people in the course, for instance, who will be addicted to PowerPoint, as we know when we go to a lot of professional development activities. There'll be other people, for instance, adopting other technologies which are much more flexible. So we can see that, you know, we're seeing professional knowledge building through interaction, and we're seeing co-constructed content and meaning. And all of this is embedded in the technology. The technology is not the answer, but it's the processes that the technology embeds. So when you're answering this question, you know, identify what your approach to teaching and learning is, and if you don't have one yet, that's fine. Start to identify at least in strengths and weaknesses, or warm spots, cool spots, or bouquets and brick bats, however you want to describe it. What you think is really good about this kind of teaching versus areas where you think you probably would never go. I mean, I must admit, at the start of this lecture, I had 10 very, very uncomfortable minutes when my computer died. That's always going to happen. Yeah, it's just beyond your control. The aim is to influence what you can influence, and then, you know, build your teaching around that. So there are comfort zones and there are discomfort zones, and that's what we're trying to work out here. What is your approach to teaching and learning? There's no right and wrong answer. Are you committed to information delivery, or are you looking at some co-constructed, some constructivist type learning? Are you willing to let go of control? Okay. Are you willing to let go of some control? And some interesting questions there when we look at the contributory model of learning. There's a parallel model by a chap named George Siemens called connectivism. And I would encourage you to have a good look at that. He published in 2005. And connectivism is really interesting because it involves distributed networks of learners. And it's always based on the fact that, you know, school used to be what we consider to be learning, but we now learn right throughout our lives in a variety of contexts and organisations. So we need a model that's going to help us survive. And the contributory model that I'm presenting here, and we'll discuss with you, I'll keep blogging about it. The one that I'm presenting to you here is one that will travel with you throughout your working and schooling career. So again, reflection 1.2, do get around to having a go at it. No right and wrong answer. And, you know, it's all about setting up your blog and getting writing. The course then moves on to considering who the contemporary learner is. And look, Mark Prensky wrote in 2005 also, actually 2007, about the digital native and the digital immigrant. I mean, theoretically, I'm too old. I'm an immigrant. You know, I didn't grow up with technology. It's a sad fact, but it's a fact. I've had to learn everything the hard way, I suppose. But when I watch my two daughters, one's 28 and one's 31, and I watch how they use technology and the power of the computer that they carry around in their mobile phone, it's completely different to me. I still have trouble syncing my phone with my home systems and a whole range of stuff. But the contemporary learner, key characteristics, and these are dealt with beautifully in the opening week. Sit back and enjoy this material. You know, we're seeing enhanced maturity and control. Yes, you know, childhood has shrunk. Knowledge, the shelf life of knowledge has shrunk. In 2010, it was deemed to be about 18 months. Here we are in 2016 now, and it's less than 12 months, the shelf life of knowledge, before it becomes new. Our brains need to be adaptive. Social entrepreneurs, we have, you know, children aged 10 and 12 making millions of dollars by designing and building apps for telephones. Technology users, traditional choices are up for question and negotiation. Inclusiveness and differentiation, there's huge diversity. You go to Papua New Guinea, for instance, and the phone reception there covers the entire island. It is so much better than the phone reception we have here in Australia. Why? Third world investment from an Irish company. Okay, inclusiveness and differentiation. Blurred gender roles, we're seeing a whole lot of things being written about that. Entrepreneurial. People seek knowledge, not necessarily in school, and that's one of the principles of connectivism. Social media, multitasking, spatial thinkers, speed. Twitch speed is an important part of this. Images, global collaborations and awareness. Your learning buddy may well be in a different country. I remember working with a group of teachers and helping them set up a class in Finland, where each student here in Australia, I'm in Cairns at the time, had a learning buddy in Finland. And the students were learning Finnish here, and the students over there were learning English. It was a fabulous collaboration. Reflection 1.3. Where do you position yourself as a learner in this unit? I mean, look at the characteristics there. Some of them take real courage, but you'll find in some aspects of your life you're already doing those things. How can you bring it in? How can you bring it in and make it conscious in your teaching? How are you going to engage with some of these principles and deal with them? As you can see, there's no right and wrong answer. It's purely personal. Please feel free to interrupt at any particular time. Setting up your wiki. Now, once again, just to let you know that I share your pain, I have actually gone about and set up my own little wiki as well. And in here I'm going to store and compile information that I may well use for some of my reflections down the track. Assessment item 2, of course, is you're building your web resource or your Weebly resource. Your wiki may come in handy for that too, for storing and connecting items and building a repository. So again, a little comment on the wiki. I won't go through mine, there's no point in doing that, but basically just showing you it's got space for discussion down here, and we can share each other's wiki and hopefully enlist people as the course goes on as collaborators and buddies in the wiki so that we can actually give each other feedback and comment. And then we start to move into this diagram, as you can see, the content-oriented course online. We start to see the course shifting away from the documents in the ebooks to more what happens between the learners, and from what happens to the learners to what then happens in your groups as you start to reflect, how you become small communities of practice engaged in the use of technology in secondary classrooms. So the wiki has a very, very deliberate and cognitive purpose here in helping you gather and organise your thoughts. Couple of questions there for people. Let's see, so who haven't we? Lee, how have you gone setting up your wiki? Have you managed to do it yet?
Yeah, I've set it up. I haven't had a really good look at it. It's new to me, and also setting up the blog page as well. So I had a little look at it this morning, and yeah, I'm really excited to learn about all these. Well, they're new to me, so yeah, it'll be good to get in there and have a go.
Great attitude, Lee. That's fantastic. Imagine how you'll impress your students, though, when you jump in there, you've got your own blog and wiki skills, and then you'll blow them away.
Hope so.
Definitely. And Candice, once again, for you, how have you gone with your blog, your wiki? Sorry.
I haven't had a chance to set up my wiki yet. I was just having a look at that before I joined the Zoom session.
Yeah.
So is it another place where we can just share resources we find or reflections?
Absolutely. You'd be putting resources there and possibly doing some, making some connections to resources, inviting people into your wiki to discuss and share some of your ideas. And that, of course, is going to help your reflections, and it's also going to be a big part of assessment task number 2.
Okay, thank you.
So that the wiki will actually make that task easier. And Tihao, are you online? Tihua? Tihui?
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry,
How do I say your beautiful name?
Tihuya, but I go by T in Australia.
T, delightful. How are you going with things?
Yeah, good. It's all new to me, so I haven't used it. I tried to do the blogger, but I've decided to go with the Weebly.
Good, yep.
Just because I found it a little bit more PowerPointy to use. I don't know if I'm right yet. I'm just in the early stages.
Fabulous, and that is your choice to make. And I think Wendy makes that very clear on the course homepage that, choose what suits. Adopt a technology that you can work with, that you think works for you. Now, the whole aim of the wiki is to actually go from a position of I know something to I know what the group knows, and ultimately to I increase what the group knows. So the wiki is kind of developmental. So you'll be expected to be doing some work in there, which is going to actually help develop some of the concepts and some of the ideas that the course raises for you as the course progresses. But as you can see, the important thing is to get in there and get it set up and become familiar with it. And it really, if you can use email, you can use a wiki and you can use a blog. The technology is really not that different. Moving on. A quick discussion of assessment, and then I'm going to throw open to you guys for some questions. Now, assessment item 1, as you can see there, it's embedded reflections. So they're about 600 to 800 words each, and as you can see, I think mine was only about 500, so you can probably even include more words than that. 3 of them, 600 to 800 words each, and they occur in weeks 3, 4 and 5. You then do, to finish that process off, a reflective synopsis. Now, the task is described in quite a bit of detail, so I do encourage you, if you haven't already, to go and have a really good look at that. Because as you're writing your embedded reflections, obviously you're taking them to a point where you're going to reflect. You do an overall reflection, like if you like, a helicopter view of your first 5 weeks. And that's basically what that assessment item is. It's a helicopter view by you, of you, as a teacher using digital technology. So you're the world's best expert on that by that stage. You'll know more than anybody else. Assessment item 2. I'll pause there first. Does anyone want to ask any questions about assessment item 1?
Yes, Colin, I do.
Georgina, fire away. Georgie, sorry.
Look, I every time it says anywhere that you need to refer to the assessment, on the Moodle, there's nothing really in there. So when you said just then go and have a look at assessment item 1 and read about it, where exactly is that information?
Okay, let me demonstrate that for you. I'll just drag across the subject page here onto my screen.
Thank you.
And as we can see here, we've got assessment and then assessment details. Now, Wendy has decided to put in the assessment details, okay, a Word document. Download that Word document, and in there you will find quite an explicit description of what's required. Now, have you seen that before, Georgia?
No, I haven't. Sorry. I didn't actually see that whole assessment details tab. I'm not sure if that was recently added or what, but okay, I'll have a look at that.
Colin,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Georgia, I don't have that on my screen and I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, I don't think we have it.
Oh, really?
Because every time you in a lot of the Moodle work, you keep referring back to look at the assessment details, but there aren't any.
Okay, so
we don't have any of that.
You don't have a link there that says assessment details on your Moodle page?
No, we just have an assessment bar, and then it has all the assessment in it, but they don't have criteria sheets or anything in them.
Right, so you would have this one.
Yeah, we have that. And that's it.
But you don't have these stipulated details. Okay, look, that's great news to me. Clearly, I don't get a student view of this, and I actually don't have editing rights on the site. So what I'll do is, first thing, I'll email Wendy Fazzo and let her know that that's the case, that assessment details isn't popping up in the student domain.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just looking on mine, and I do have an assessment details tab, but I think maybe you just need to make sure that you're on the home page of the course. I haven't noticed that until today. I haven't even looked over there, but it does actually come up if you're on the Welcome to Digital Pedagogy's page, on the home page part of it, it does come up.
Okay, well, good. We're starting to sort through this and starting to deal with the confusion around that. So it is there. So can we just get everybody online at the moment to go back to the EDSE homepage? And just
yes, I've got it on my homepage.
Yeah, I just had a look and I found it too.
Yeah, I've got it on my homepage.
Yeah, me too. It's
brilliant.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Yeah, and Georgia, what a great question to ask, because I think you just saved a lot of grief. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. So please don't hesitate to bring anything up. Now, those assessment details are there. You can download them once. What I might do anyway is just send it out to people on an email as an attachment so that people have got it, and then just let them know where to find it. Okay, so I'll follow that up with some action. But it is definitely there. And if you have a look at those, assessment task 2 is about 3 pages long. So take a highlighter and pick out the eyes and bones, and if it's something you don't understand, put it on the Q&A or email it through and we'll talk it through. Okay. Any other questions while we're on the website here or on the Moodle? Now your assessment basically is up. Assessment task 1 basically concludes around about the break week. And then the second part of the course is really about the Weebly and the portfolio. And of course the wikis come into more prominence then as well. So the course really is a course of 2 halves. And I think if you keep your momentum, keep it moving along slowly as you're going, it's probably the best way to manage this course rather than, or unit I should say, it's just used here at CQU. It's the best way to manage it. All right, if there's no more questions on that, I will move it aside. And assessment item 2 is a digital portfolio presented as a Weebly site. Now, I know that sounds quite unusual and probably quite alien, but anybody that uses Weebly basically knows that it's just an embedded website which acts as a repository where you can store and link and connect to a whole range of resources, what we call, in the digital world, artifacts. They're all learning artifacts. So obviously you'll be collecting them as you go along, and your Weebly website will be structuring them, building them and presenting them as a pedagogical connection, as some unit of work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Colin, question on that. So it's definitely presented in Weebly?
Yes, it is. Yep.
So I have a question too. If we set up a Weebly for this first assessment, which is what I've done at the moment for the blog post, can we use that same one for assessment task 2, the same web address?
Now that's a really interesting question. I've not used Weebly like that before. I would imagine that Look, I'll have to get back to you on that one. Who was this one, sorry? Who's asked this question?
It was Phoebe. Hi.
Phoebe. Again, another good question. I'm not sure whether Weebly will prevent you from doing that, because once you've used one address, you may have to create a slightly different address. But we'll have a look at that. I'll get in there and work it out for you and get back with an answer to everyone on that one. Whether I would imagine your digital portfolio, if you're using Weebly, would need a slightly different address.
Because what I've done at the moment, I've set up the Weebly and then it had the instructions on Moodle to set up like a blog in Weebly. So there's like a blog tab. So all my reflections will be in that. So what I assume then when it comes to assessment task 2, they would take the form of more pages in Weebly, if that makes sense. So I assume it would all be in the same web address, just in different locations. That's kind of what I had thought. So
I've sort of started doing the same thing.
Well, there you go, Lee. Thank you. So it looks like we've got a rebellion on our hands, and that might be a good way to go. As I said, I'll jump in and just make sure so that I can support you in that, and just get it cleared nice and early so that we're not looking for 2 distinct assessment items, because they actually have to be loaded up into the CQU Moodle, so they have to come up in a format that's loaded and loadable. So, and I think that's just your addresses, so it should work at this stage. But let me confirm that, please. Yeah, good questions. I hadn't thought of those. Any other questions that we can ask at this stage?
Yeah, I have one again. Sorry, Colin.
Georgia, fire away.
With the wiki assessment, when you say we need to have like other peers reflecting on our work,
yes.
Do you have a certain amount of people you want for that? Like how many people do we need to engage with or sort it out? Like
look, it would,
one or more than one? Or?
It would be more than one, and you will invite them into your group. I mean, a wiki obviously has an invitation key. And if anyone looks at my wiki at the moment, for instance, it's got an open code, so you can actually invite yourself in and have a look.
So how do we just invite them through, does that send them an email or something?
Yeah, you just actually invite them through the wiki itself, and they get notification to come and join your wiki, to accept or decline.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And look, we'll look at that as separate items as we go forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No worries. 'Cause it can tend to be a little bit overwhelming if you jump in and try to do everything at once. So yeah, we will unpack things gradually as we go.
Oh.
And again, great questions. Any other questions, comments or feedback at this particular point in time? I mean, the level of questions to me indicates that this group certainly attending this session are right into it and you know, quite mobile and asking some very good questions. Anything else you would like to try and clear up before we close the session today?
Well, just to clarify the whole Weebly Blogger Wiki situation, it's Phoebe talking again. I just looked on Moodle where I read it. Like I definitely read somewhere that a Weebly would be fine for it because it says it's in the Contemporary Learner book thing in week 1, and under Reflection 1.2 it says if you haven't already done so, follow the guide to core unit materials and set up a blog. You can use Blogger or Weebly for your journal for this course. So that's where I read it from.
Brilliant. And look, for that reason, I imagine it's fine. And you know, I think as long as the address in Weebly is explicit, we will be able to access that material for assessment purposes. And that's, you know, that's where I'm coming from. I just want to make sure there's no confusion around that. And but I think you're probably spot on, Phoebe.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Just, yeah, if you could let me know if that's going to work or not, then I can set up another thing as well. If I have to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other questions or comments? If there's not, we'll wind it up for today. It's a short session, just an orientation session. And next week we'll be able to pick up and have a look at the nature of digital pedagogy, where we can get into a little bit of the theory and some of the practice too that's going around schools at the moment. Any questions? Hopefully you've all got my email address. It is c.baskin@cku.edu.au. And I do welcome your emails and your inquiries. I think the more we can get out of the road at the start of the course, the easier and the smoother the course will progress. So I do appreciate that. If there's nothing else today, I'll wish you well and say how nice it is to meet you even online. Hopefully you'll get to the stage where you stop blanking out your cameras and that would be really good, and we get into some good heated discussion. If you can, use the forums, because I browse them regularly and I'll pick up on hot topics, and if I can see some hot topics, then I can prepare things for these sessions each week, and that way you can make me work, make me